perspective, we have achieved that in spades. Right? When we launched the networking project, there was one hardware platform, which was Facebook Wedge. There was one piece of software, which was the Open Network install environment, and a lot of people talking about stuff. Now there's 7 approved software projects, 18 approved hardware platforms, 22 hardware platforms waiting to be approved, and I think 6 or 7 software projects waiting to be approved. So there's been a huge amount of contribution from the community, and if you go back through and look at every one of those pieces of technology, it's somebody created technology that was useful to a broad set of people and allowed a coupling of maybe this piece of hardware through a piece of functional software off to a consumer, and kind of draws a straight line from invention to usefulness in commercial practices. From a Cumulus Networks perspective, I've been super consistent that the foundation of open networking is open hardware. Open hardware is not necessary, is not sufficient to be open networking, but it's fundamentally necessary. And this group is that kind of piece that provides the open hardware and the means to couple it with software and deliver it. You know, when I look around the room, I look at hardware partners or hardware suppliers that are involved here, whether it's an ASIC supplier or a systems vendor. And you recognize that, yeah, you guys are competing against each other, but by participating in this ecosystem, you let each of the software players have a chance to view your technology, leverage your technology, and give you a route to market. Likewise, I see a bunch of software suppliers where you might take the same piece of hardware and put different operating software on it, and you end up with a very different experience to the consumer. Again, giving, in the end, the consumer choice and opening up and freeing the market. So I just want to thank you all for participating. We at Cumulus are 1,000% behind this, always have been, always will, and I want to applaud you. So give yourselves a hand for showing up. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Hello. Hey, welcome everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces. Real quickly, is anyone here attending an OCP event for the first time today? Wow, that is great. So it looks like 30%. So welcome to OCP and welcome to this workshop. A little bit about myself. Bill Carter. I've been in the industry for 35 years. I spent most of that time at Intel as an architect. I started with OCP about 5 or 6 years ago, right after it was formulated. I think I came on board in about 2012 and worked as a project lead, as a member of our incubation committee. And then a year ago, actually came on board full-time as the CTO. So I've had the opportunity to see OCP from its very early inception, and when we had some of the very first meetings of a few hundred people, and now we have engineering workshops all over the world where we have a few hundred people in attendance. The most important thing that I can say about OCP is that you've already made that first step. The most important thing, that's being here. There's so much opportunity to collaborate with everybody in the room. And I'll give you just a couple of small examples. We've seen companies that normally would consider each other competitors, and they get into a workshop, into a summit meeting, into a project call, and recognize that they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to develop the same product, and they're coming from it from a proprietary perspective, and they realize that if they're able to collaborate with a potential competitor and co-author a specification, that specification is more widely accepted in the industry and by their customers. And if they can overcome that and collaborate on that specification and use OCP as the forum for that collaboration and the forum to submit that specification, that they pursue that avenue, they have a better specification together, it's more widely adopted, they have more interest from their potential customers, and they create a win-win for their company. Likewise, on the adopter side, we see similar stories where we'll see two adopters, two users of hardware that'll be in a room like this, and we'll start a discussion, and they quickly learn that they think that they need some piece of custom hardware or some custom feature in a server or in a network switch or a storage device. And through these conversations, they learn that their unique, what they thought was a unique need wasn't unique at all, that somebody else in the room had the same need. And so they start talking about what that need and that requirement is, and before you know it, you have a supplier that's in the room that says, I'd be happy to build that product for you. And so had they not had that conversation, they may not have generated that interest from the supply base, because they may not drive the demand necessary to offset the investment. But by working with others in the community, they're able to kind of consolidate their demand and their requirements and come up with a set of consolidated requirements, feed that back to the community, and it results in a better product. So I encourage you to have these conversations. Meet people that are at the table, meet people at lunch, talk about what you're doing, talk about your involvement, and look for opportunities to work with the community. We're going to try to get the... Okay. Okay, let me see if I can... Here we go. So, with that in mind, I just got a couple of slides I want to talk about. Ways to get involved, and like I say, participation is the big thing. You've made that first step. Besides these workshops, encourage you to enroll in the mail list and participate in the monthly project calls. Every one of the contributions are vetted out through these monthly calls. You have a chance to discuss your product. We encourage people that are considering making a contribution to actually discuss that in these project calls as early as possible, and actually seek feedback from the community. So it gives, as a supplier, as a product manager, gives you a chance to seek that feedback, and certainly as an adopter or consumer, it gives you a chance to influence some of those products. And although you think about this and you say, well, I don't really want to talk about what my needs are because they're unique and I consider this my IP or proprietary, at least you're having some open conversations and you're generating these connections. And so after that call, you say, I think I'm going to call Jeff or Omar or Scott or Derek, and I'm going to talk to him on a one-on-one basis and share some of these ideas. But those conversations occur because of the disclosures that are happening at the project meeting. So again, get involved in that. Beyond that, just after you've participated, there's opportunities to provide some leadership, both at the project level and at the IC level. We just recently elected a new IC. IC stands for Incubation Committee. It is think of it as our technical leadership group. They oversee and review all of the contributions. They set the charter for the work group, the guidelines for the work groups. Very senior set of folks. I think we have 9 or 10 members on the IC. They were just either elected or re-elected 2 weeks ago, and that's a 2-year term. So we do that on every 2 years, and we do project leads every 2 years. So Scott and Omar are the co-project leads for the networking group. This is the beginning of their 2nd year, and then next summer we'll have elections for project leads. So opportunities there. And certainly encourage you to contribute. And we ask a couple things. We give you a couple different choices on how to contribute. We're not a standards organization. We are really here to promote products and promote adoption and promote better hardware for the cloud, better open hardware for the cloud. We give you an opportunity to contribute at a spec level. We encourage you to also contribute your designs and open source your designs, but it is not a requirement that you open source your design. We're quite happy having an open sourced spec. Whether it's a design or whether it's a spec, we also do require that there's a product available. So again, not a standards body. If you contribute a spec, we also demand that there be a product that's made available and made available to the entire community. And so recognize that it may take a few months to actually design that product. That's fine. Want to get the information out as quickly as possible to the community so they can plan around that. But again, at some point when you launch that product, we want it to be available to the community. And last year we launched a marketplace that allows you to go and search on all the specifications and all the products that are available. And that marketplace is growing every day. And then obviously we have lots of opportunities to attend summit meetings, workshops like this, and various OCP events that are around the world. We have 7 or 8 eight or 9 different communities. This is the networking community. We also have a certification and interoperability work group. And one of the things that work group is looking at is how do I document reference architectures so that we kind of match open software standards, open software binaries with with the open hardware platforms and try to bring those together into solutions. So we're working on that. The data center group is looking at some white papers on how to encourage people to build more efficient data centers, some BKMs on how to do that, and ways to encourage the colos around the world in designing their data centers to handle larger, more efficient racks, deliver higher voltages to those racks, which then drives your efficiency. The hardware management group is right now is really focused on a couple of things. One is just open standards for manageability, remote manageability. But the big issue there, or big opportunity there, is with OpenBMC. And there's a tremendous amount of work going on with OpenBMC, and I think we'll see some pretty exciting announcements that'll come out at the September 25th workshop in Dallas. So I'm really looking forward to that. The HPC work group has been pretty quiet for the last year or two. Amber Graner, who was our community manager up until recently, most of you guys, or everybody who's been in OCP knows Amber. She was just elected to the IC position to oversee the HPC work group, and I'm sure that she'll re-energize that work group, so we're looking forward to that. I won't talk about networking, you're all here. The Open Rack work group is actually, I just realized we dropped in an old slide. We recently renamed it the Rack and Power group, and so now we're not just looking at Open Rack as a mechanical standard, but we're looking at all rack architectures. So we have the Open Rack, the 21-inch wide rack standard that has DC power distribution. We also have a 19-inch version of that called the CG Open Rack 19. CG for carrier grade, so it carries a couple of features that are needed for the central office, front plug, accessibility of the gear, but it's 19-inch gear and it's compatible. So, and then obviously the EIA 310 standard we still support. Probably half of our contributions are in support of the standard EIA rack mechanicals. So that one group oversees that, looking for interoperability, interchangeability of components, power shelves, DC distribution schemes across those 3 mechanical architectures. Why 3 different ones? Well, every data center is different, every region of the world is different, every power delivery system in your facility is different, and those 3 rack architectures tend to favor those differences. Every company, every data center has a preference, and so between those 3, we think we have 99.9% of the world demand covered, the needs covered by those. We have a very robust server work group, and all of your compute nodes, as well as the mezzanine card standard is being developed in there, and that group is actually very active right now, working on the 3.0 release of the mezzanine card. So they're adding additional bandwidth and functionality onto that. And that's a very, very popular I/O daughter card that plugs onto servers. We have a storage group that's, again, very recently, in the last year or so, become very active. They were looking at some new APIs to actually optimize storage for cloud-based usage models. And the first activity there is looking at, they call it the fast fail hard drive API. If you're familiar with hard drives, hard drives when you have a physical, if the read doesn't occur on the first read, it goes to this retry, and it'll retry 10 or 15 different times. Obviously, that messes up your performance and your latency. When it does that, it's waiting for the command to return. That's a bad thing in a cloud environment. So they're actually redefining a new API that will allow that to occur very quickly. And so that's just one example of the work that's going on. They are able to move very quickly in this open environment in a collaborative fashion with people that are otherwise competitors with each other. We provide the forum and the legal structure for them to collaborate. And so we'll see that spec come out, and then we'll see other specs that'll follow around storage. Besides some of the PCI-based direct connect storage subsystem, and there's other things going on. And then in the telco space, we have a very active work group there. They actually leverage a lot of the products that come out of the networking group, and looking at very specific functionality for the edge of their network. The telco network really starts in a commercial building, or even in the residence, and then it goes back to their central office, and then to some more centralized or regional data center. So they want to manage that as one big contiguous homogeneous network, and so they're leveraging some of their the GPON and so on products. They're also working with TIP. We formed a formal relationship with the Telecom Infrastructure Project, TIP, and we're collaborating with them on a universal customer premise equipment box, and we'll be responsible for the hardware specification and sourcing of that, and TIP is working on the open source software. So lots of stuff going on across the community. I mentioned that we're a product organization. We've recently refreshed our website, and so now we have a marketplace where every product that is formally recognized as being either OCP or OCP inspired, OCP inspired or OCP accepted, and carries that certification mark, goes on the website. We started off a few months ago with about 30 products. We rolled this out as a concept in Q4 last year. We had about 30 products in Q2. It's about 50 some right now, and it should be 75 by the end of the quarter. So a huge backlog of products that are going through that product to seek formal recognition and carry that logo. This website, the marketplace, also allows you to get to all of the specs that have been contributed, as well as the design files. So if you haven't seen it, go take a look at that. And lots of upcoming events. We're starting to plan now, doing a full 12-month rolling schedule. Here's obviously we're here today. In September, we have engineering workshops down in Dallas. It's being held in conjunction with DCD. So I call it the Day Zero event, is the OCP event. It's free to attend. And we have 5 different workshops. There's 2 tracks, and so you can attend 2, maybe 3 of these workshops. You can't attend all 5 because some of those may be ran in parallel. But again, lots of stuff going on there. We're going to be at the Broadband World Forum in Berlin, and we actually have a very large showcase there, and we're going to showcase OpenRack and CG OpenRack 19 architectures and have a multi-vendor showcase there. And we're actually offering, if you're interested in attending, contact Dirk Van Slyke. He is actually going to be able to provide some space for suppliers within our booth. There's some opportunity there. So, and then following that, we have another co-location event with DCD. This was the DCD Zeta structure. It's held in London on November 9th and 10th. So we're the Day Zero event on November 8th. We have 4 tracks already committed to participate in that. We have a data center, telco, hardware management, and server project tracks there as well. And then to close out the year, we have an event up in another one of these engineering workshops up in Toronto. Then we roll into the new year, and then we get a lot of events in the new year and followed with our summit in March. So again, lots of activities going on literally around the world.
Bill,
So,
if I may,
yeah.
a couple of points about the upcoming events. Ooh, I sound so official.
So, but hold on, I was just going to, before I close here, I was going to welcome Archna. And so Archna is our new community director. And why don't you come up real quick? So she's been with us for, 6 weeks now, I think?
Yeah.
And she's located here in California. And so pleasure to have her on board. And why don't you tell us a little bit about Archna?
So my name is Archna Haylock, and I'm an industry veteran here. Probably not as long in the industry as some of you, but been with IBM for the last 15 years doing semiconductor, doing services, server and storage for them, primarily sales in the US. And before that I was with Texas Instruments, so calling on Cisco, that was my account there. So I just recently joined, as Bill said, and what I wanted to do is point out a couple of things on the upcoming events. Number one, we would love to have all of you register for these events. The workshops are completely free, and if you go to the blog section of our portal, you will see a blog that Dirk has released on this, and in it are a lot of links, and one of the links is to register for this workshop, so please go ahead and register. We would love to have you there. We would also love to have you sponsor a workshop if your organization is looking for a way to get out there and release your name and your affiliation with OCP. So if any of your organizations is looking to sponsor either a lunch or a break or, I don't know, lanyards, whatever it is, we would love to have you there for that. The same applies for, for the telco workshop and some of the other workshops. We're looking for panelists. So if you're interested in participating in a panel for any of the workshops or presenting your product, if you have a new release for a product that's coming out that would be good for the OCP community to hear about, a new launch that you're coming out with, maybe you're coming out with something as supercomputing or an upcoming event, this would be a great showcase for you to go out there and talk to the community. You will have the OCP community as well as many attendees that will be going to the DCD, the Data Center Dynamics Colo and Cloud conference the next day. So that audience is at your disposal at day 0. So please take advantage of that in Dallas. Coming up in Berlin, we don't have a workshop there, but we have a showcase. So if you're interested in presenting your product there, we would love to have you there as one of our partners. So just a lot of different ways to get involved, not just by participating in our monthly calls, but also actually participating in our workshops and being one of the presenters to talk about your company and what your company is doing with OCP or what you have in terms of offerings for OCP. That's pretty much all I had, but I wanted to take this moment and thank Cumulus Network, Scott Emery, JR, Kurt, and Omar here for hosting us. It's a lot of preparation going into today, a lot of work that the team has put together. So please give them a round of applause for all their work. And then Tech, who is helping us here make this live stream and all the audio, video capabilities that you see here. So they've been a great partner for us, and hopefully the folks that are online, if there's anything that comes up, please let us know. Either text myself or Dirk, and we'll make it happen if something isn't acting, or something's acting up and you're not getting a good quality, because that's the whole purpose of doing this, is to offer quality audio video. So with that.
Okay, I get to introduce Amber. I've done this a few times. We're partners in crime with the foundation, so welcome back to the podium, back to the stage. Do we need to?
Yeah, I gotta
okay.
do this one. technology's wonderful and it works, right? Well, while he's getting that ready, there's a few things. I think Cumulus and Omar and Scott and everybody are going to hear thank you with every presentation today. And I especially want to say thanks to Omar and Scott and to the foundation for organizing this. Most of you may be familiar with me, so it's a little bit different to be on this side of the podium and not organizing it or not being part of Open Compute. So I may stumble through this a little bit because I haven't presented for Snaproute since I started. So this will be my first presentation with Snaproute as well. I have it on a PDF if Bill wants to bring his computer back up.
Hey folks, I know while Amber is getting set up there with the AV, one thing I forgot to mention was there are a lot of newcomers here to OCP, so if anyone has any questions about membership, about the communities, I know Bill went through every single community there, but if you have questions about how to make a specification contribution, how to make a design contribution, how you can participate, please feel free to reach out to me in either the breaks or whenever. I'm going to be here all day. So just with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber.
So it's exciting, again, as JR had mentioned, to see where the networking project was in 2013 versus where we are today. To see, and I actually have a slide on this, the hyperscalers did disaggregation very well. The server industry, disaggregation has been part of that industry for a long time. So it's great to see the disaggregation and networking rising and seeing that come out of really rise in open compute back in 2013 as to where we are today. And to be part of that and to continue being part of the foundation and part of the organization is great. So these first few slides, to many of you, it will be preaching to the choir, if you will. And I promise not to dwell too much on the past and talk about a lot of the present and where we are and where we're going. I have to admit again that it's a little bit different being on this side of the podium and speaking on behalf of another organization other than Open Compute. So a couple questions before I begin. How many people are familiar with Snaproute and FlexSwitch? Perfect. And are there any journalists or reporters in the audience? All right. I had a little spiel for them if there were. I don't have to go into that now. Save some time. Okay, so let me just get on with this. So as most of you know, this is going to, like I said, preaching to the choir, but this is why why Snaproute was founded. When the networking operators left Apple to form Snaproute, they wanted to create a way to manage the network that was simpler, it was scalable, it was able to lower expenditures, both OpEx and CapEx, and bring about greater choice to consumers, which I think everybody in this room probably has the same idea, that running the network old school is difficult. Devices and designs are brittle, and what I mean by that is that networking, operating systems in the past, and the software is monolithic and didn't give a lot of choice, for users to pick and choose what options they wanted to enable, and combine that with black box hardware, the choice, often got completely removed from users. Again, preaching to the choir, you all know this or you wouldn't be in this room today. You're all part of the open software, open hardware, and you want to enable choice. So do we. Granted, there are some users out there who may not want choice, but in this day and age of disaggregation and open hardware, I'm not sure why anyone would want less choice. So with FlexSwitch, Snaproute seeks to usher in a modern, modular, and mature networking architecture. Now, my coworker Prasanna, who's sitting over here, is going to come up a little bit later and talk about FlexSwitch as a product. But I want to take a few minutes just to go through, again, I'm not going to go over a lot of these slides because, again, it's all about enabling choice and letting users, enable only those elements which they need, not forcing them to enable everything. Again, modern, modular, mature, and scalable. Everything out there, you wouldn't be sitting in this room if you liked all the proprietary pieces and all the closed black box solutions. You wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't want to change that. None of us would be. And as Bill talked about, everybody coming together, maybe some of us are in competition with each other. You're competing with the organization sitting across from you. But when we all come together and share our ideas, we make the ecosystem stronger. And so that's what we're wanting to do. Again, making it stronger and enabling choice. Again, I'm not telling anybody here anything that you didn't already know. Anyone that's been involved with OCP over any amount of time has seen the rise of disaggregation on the server front and have witnessed the rise and ushering in of disaggregation on the networking front. Again, hyperscalers have done this. They solved this problem a long time ago, on the server side of things, and we're now solving it on the networking side. And when I say we, I don't just mean Snaproute, I mean the we sitting in this room. And so it's exciting times and ones that I'm really glad to be part of both on a personal level and on a professional level. So what does that mean for Snaproute and FlexSwitch and OCP? So before I turn the mic over to Prasanna, I did want to mention a couple things about Open FlexSwitch. Many of you were around and part of the networking organization when we contributed Open Snaproute. That was back in 2016. But from 2015 to the present, Snaproute has been on full-on startup mode. How many of you guys started with a startup mode or with a startup now, so you know what that's like, the first 2 years of a startup? How many? Where's JR? He can raise his hand too, sitting here. Like it's a little bit chaotic because you know what you want to do, and then you start out and you have that first layer of visionaries, and then you bring in, you grow your staff, you grow your engineering staff, and you grow your senior leadership. Once you get your senior leadership in place, a lot of times a different focus takes on. Things narrow down, become more concise, more focused, and a very concise effort. So there was a lot of interest in Snaproute and FlexSwitch, and there still is today. But now, over the last 2 years, we've learned a lot. And when I say a lot is its own sentence, meaning that in the last 6 months, we've gone through a huge growth spurt as an organization and in our code base. Now, when we contributed the code base in 2016, it was not a mature code base. And then as you grow and you, as a startup, especially not a non-profit startup, but a for-profit startup, there's a lot of things you have to take into account, especially like how do you keep the lights on, how do you pay your employees, how do you do all those type of things that every business, every person sitting in here is working for someone who has to worry about paying your paycheck and doing all those things. And so with that, we really focused on, our commercial product, and the contributed code base didn't get much attention. So what we want to do is make sure that we set the right expectations going forward, and I want to tell you why you haven't seen the repositories in the tree. And that's because we made a conscious decision with our senior leadership to pull all the open code off of both GitHub and for us personally and Open Compute. Not permanently. What we want to do is we want to make sure that when we hand it back over, we're going through an internal review right now, and then we're going to go through a relaunch. So we want to make sure that we give the community access to a really hardened code base, a code that's reliable and it's mature, and that you all can have confidence, code confidence, if you will, in what you're using and what you're downloading. And so given that, we want to make sure that it's the latest, greatest, that it's as mature as it can be, and that we're not having to go, oh wait, that repository is old, let me get the new one for you. So we've pulled it down for now. It's going through the internal review process. Matter of fact, they started that late last week. And then once it's reviewed and we get that open code base where we want it and that we're proud of it, we're going to relaunch it into the community. So I wanted everyone to know like where that was sitting, why you haven't seen it, what's going on. We're growing. Again, many of you in this audience today are working with us on the vendor side of things and on the software side of things. And so it's not gone forever. We just pulled it down so we could update it and then relaunch it with a better code base. And we'll take questions after Prasanna comes up. Prasanna's going to talk about our product, not necessarily the open side of it, but where we were, because many of you probably knew where we were in 2015 and 2016, but you really haven't heard a whole lot about where we're going and what our product is looking like. So currently, Prasanna, you can start making your way up. He's going to discuss a little bit more about the product and our current focus, which is out-of-band, leaf spine, Voyager. I know most of Omar have heard of the Voyager. Transport L1 is ready today. L2, L3 we're currently working on, and the image is close to being finalized. So we are still doing a lot of active participation in and around the networking community on the open side, but we've just taken a step back for just a little while we get the focus refocused and re-energized in certain lanes, instead of like most startups where you go out for every lane, and now we've got all of our key players in, and now we're starting to really narrow down our focus and really concentrate on what we're releasing out there to the public and where we're going to participate. So I will be, by saying me, participating in the networking group. Really, Snaproute will be taking a more active participation in the networking group, and I can be found in the HPC group as well, on the IC committee for that. So you can ask me questions as well. With that, Prasanna, the floor is yours. Do you have a mic? Okay.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks, everyone, for your time. And great to see a lot of familiar faces here. And we have Phil here from Snaproute. Phil, you can wave your hand. So we just got him out of the woods, so he's getting used to the light and the air conditioning, so be nice to him. So we can, myself, Amber, and Phil, we will take questions right after our session. So what do we do at Snaproute? Okay, so just at the very high level, so we have a bunch of white boxes. We want to enable those white boxes. We want to support them. Protocols are protocols. ARP is ARP. BGP is BGP. And manageability is manageability. We changed a little bit, but at the core, it's the same. So at Snaproute, what we are trying to do is we are not really reinventing the wheel. We are trying to make it better, right? So you can't drive cars with wooden wheels. So we are just trying to make it better. So 3 key points, right? One is the choices and the enablement of choices. And the number 2 is the flexibility and the modularity. These are the 3 themes that we have as our guiding principles. So Amber has the same slide. So we have a very vibrant ecosystem when it comes to the compute. And we know about the big iron vendors, right? It's one monolithic piece, and you are basically locked in. And when it comes to the network disaggregation, don't slaughter me for that question mark. So the point here is that we want the same kind of a vibrant ecosystem here as well. So the question marks can be filled with one or many, but at the end of the day, we want to have a similar ecosystem as we have for compute. So that is what we are trying to get to. So in terms of our solutions, there are 3 key pieces to the solution. One is the cross fabric, which is very fundamentally, it's a hardware abstraction layer. So you can have white boxes, and the cross fabric will abstract it, so it should seamlessly work. The FlexSwitch NOS, here we have the protocol layers that runs as microservices. So the key point here is that you install only, it's a true microservice-based architecture. So you install only what is needed. A prime example is that recently we did some work with one of our major customer. So they had a really bare bone box, really with very low memory, with a very simple CPU, and they wanted to run some very specific applications on top of that. And we were able to disable all the things that they did not need it, and we were able to fit the software into the hardware that they had. So that's a prime example of the microservices architecture. So that's the differentiator we bring in. And when it comes to the APIs are the norm now, and ours is the API first company. Okay, so we have a rich set of APIs, and we also support CLIs because people are comfortable with CLIs, and it's not going to die overnight, right? So we do support CLIs as well, but we are the API-first company. So as a company, these are the three key pieces of the software that we have. It's the same thing in a different way that we put. So we have the cross-fabric on top of the white boxes, and this is the interesting thing. The OS choice, okay? So we have a bunch of, any network devices has some sort of operating system, but the key point here is that when you are moving towards a data-centric based architecture where the compute and the network, they are kind of going on, taking a similar path, when you have the same ecosystem, when it comes to the OS, it makes it a little more easier and simple because you know the feature sets, any security threats that are out there, any patches that you get, you can apply it across your network, irrespective of whether it is compute or the network elements. So that is a cool thing there. And then you have the software components on top of it, and then you just install or activate what you really need. And on top of that, you can have the applications. Now, here is the interesting part. So when it comes to the open source ecosystem, the key point is that one is your contribution, and the second is how you are consuming it. The key point here is that you have an open ecosystem. When you consume it, when you package it as a solution, people get the same experience. And the people are very familiar with a lot of open source projects, and they get the same experience when they try to use the network, right? You need not relearn things depending on the vendor. So in this particular case, the software, our software is fundamentally built on these four things. The Golang language is what we used. Apache Thrift messaging system is what we use. Redis database and the Nano message system. It's all open source based. So that is one cool thing about this. When it comes to the operationalizing and installing and operationalizing FlexSwitch software, basically, we have tested everything with Ansible, Puppet, and Chef, and we are going to be at the Ansible Fest next week as well. So we support all of these tools completely, and we can package it as well. And when it comes to the monitoring, we support, again, telemetry, fundamentally telemetry, but then you can use any of the Grafana, InfluxDB, Prometheus, or Telegraph, any kind of tools. So that's how we kind of try to promote the ecosystem. So people who are familiar with any of these tools, they get the same experience. So that's at the high level, that's pretty much what Snaproute is about. And that's the kind of a product line we have. And myself, Phil, and Amber would be available to take any questions if you have time or later. All right. Thank you. So any questions?
Questions? Who's first?
Yes. I always puzzle with the openness, and recently, I have found a lot of companies, ODM, or a lot of name brands company. Traditionally, they have been supporting the white box, but they no longer support the white box. So I wonder, in the Snaproute, you are open source in your network operating system. So how do you see your world? Because those big companies, name brand company, carry the white box, but they don't see the profitability there.
You want to take that?
So, like any company any open source company, that is supported by a corporate, or any open source project that's supported by a corporate entity, there usually is your open version and then your supported or your commercial version. So we're still falling in the same line as everyone else, where you have here's your free and here's your commercial version. Like we're still going to do that. We still work with all the white box vendors. We're not changing any of that. We're not going to a completely proprietary black box solution. Matter of fact, I think all of our roadmap and everything that we're working on right now is all white box switches. So you might.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So, I mean, people want to experience, we want to contribute back to the open source community as well, but then we also have a separate branch to work on our own features because we want to make sure that it stabilizes before we contribute back. And just like I said, it's one thing is the contribution, and the second thing is that making use of the available open source tools. So it's two different things. So when you use the open source tools that are out there, when you package it together, it makes it much easier for people to consume because they are familiar with, if you're familiar with one, you should be able to use it. That's all.
You talk about the putting back the flag switch open code back into the GitHub. Is there a timeline for that?
No, I would love to say it was going to be tomorrow. Yeah, exactly. I'm always that person. Yeah, we'll have it tomorrow. But that's not the case. It all depends on how long our internal review goes. Not only does it go through our engineers, it also goes through our customer support or our support team, which is Phil's team. I want to so it's going to have to be reviewed at several different layers, and that process only begun late last week. And so I would love to say by the end of the year, which I don't know. I don't have a timeline for you, but if I have my way, it's going to be as soon as possible. So, but I don't know. I'm only like 3 months into this, so I don't know how much my way I get right now.
There's a lot of hardening that is going on right now. So I don't know that we can provide a timeline today, but we could maybe give a follow-up. I don't know if there's some way that we can, publish that, or if Amber wants to take that, we can give you guys an update on what the timeline would be for reposting the code.
We'll be providing more updates now through the monthly meetings and the networking calls. We're going to be providing more information now. I just couldn't say what we were doing before, but now I can.
So yeah, the monthly calls are a good time for status updates. So you can give us those as you get closer. Making me walk all over.
Hi. So it's been a few months since I talked to you last time. The strategy was switch D and CLI is closed source, the rest is open source. Has anything changed? Are you still planning to go this way to the market? Your initial strategy to market was switch D, CLI, closed, the rest is open, right?
Yes.
Has anything changed?
No.
Thank you.
Just referring back to the architecture diagram that you had, so is there any guidance you can give in terms of what you're thinking about keeping open source, when it comes back, kind of what, within the protocol stack or within the hardware abstraction stack, or it's always got APIs, kind of all of it, only certain slices? Is there any guidance you can say what you're thinking about?
We are going to start with the protocol stack, so that's where we are. So we kind of learned our lesson also that kind of a hard way, because it's going to take some time for it to stabilize and to harden the code. We kind of learned it the hard way, actually. So that's why we pulled the code back. So right now, Phil's team is doing the hardening work, and we want to run it through some really good hardening exercises, and then it'll be in a staggered manner. But basically, to begin with, it's going to be the protocol layer. That's what is going to be back in the open source. Yeah.
A question back here.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to understand the difference between the open switch and this contribution, right? Just for the benefit of everyone, how is this different, or is it replacing open switch? And what's the story behind this?
Phil.
Are you referring to the OpenSwitch project, which is not part of, it's not Snaproute, but like the actual open?
Yeah, the one before this one. So, I mean, I thought this replaced OpenSwitch to some extent.
You're talking about the Linux Foundation project, right? Right. So while we have participated in with OpenSwitch, it's two separate projects. It's actually two separate projects. While it was born out of the same initial code base, it's not the same. It's not the same code base, and we're actually relooking at how we focus on the Open Switch project and participating with the Linux Foundation and the folks at Dell. So that project, they still have their meetings every week. We're on those calls every week, but it's not Open Switch and Open Snaproute are two separate projects and two separate, legally separate projects. They're not the same projects. I don't know if that's what you were, does that answer it? Okay. I know, we have
Steve, did you have a question?
Steve had a question too. Yeah. I sent a couple emails, and I think Glenn did an introductory email, but not to you. I just didn't know who I was supposed to talk to. So if we can, I can touch base with you after this, and yeah, apparently I haven't been put in touch with the right people. So once I get in touch with the right people, I'll go from there. So it'll be a short conversation, and we'll figure it out.
Hi, you talked about the microservices. Oh, I just want to know, how do you deliver the microservices to your customer? Is it like Docker or anything else?
We have both. So it can be a Docker too, or you can install it on your own. Yeah. We have both solutions.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Is that anything else? Okay, thank you. And now, Rajat, I think you're up with your CBW.
Is Murthy from Mojo here? All right. First time meeting you in person, so. Okay. Yep. So before I go, hi. So my name is Rajat Ghai. I facilitate CVW, which is Campus Branch Wi-Fi subgroup in OCP. I see a bunch of new faces. So the way I plan to spend this time is like we actually have two topics to discuss. I'm just going to talk about two topics. I'll just go presentation mode, right? Okay. So there is a generic Campus Branch Wi-Fi, kind of like a call to action kind of presentation. And then we have a specific topic about, the security and aspects of Campus Branch Wi-Fi that applies to, specific to CVW and ONI. So Murthy is going to talk about that. So I have both presentations here. And we just do like 15 minutes each and interleave with Q&A. So I said, like, my name is Rajat Ghai, and we've been doing this for a year now. So since, for the benefit of some new people over here, we know all the beautiful things about disaggregation of hardware and software, has been proven very well in the hyperscale for like many, many years in OCP. And as we know, we have a healthy ecosystem of 10 gig, 100 gig products in hyperscale data centers today, and nothing new to talk about. However, so we thought back in 2015 that same thing can be extended to the edge, to the campus branch Wi-Fi. And so back in 15, we talked about it in OCP meetings. I believe in Boston meeting we had the first time we talked about it, and then in early 16, EdgeCore, they submitted like first set of hardware designs for wireless access points as well as branch switches. So there was a Broadcom-based hardware designs in 16, and then Qualcomm-based designs as a second set in 17. And this is just a sample. They're all available, on this wiki. This is just one sample example. Like, if this is a Broadcom-based 3x3 MIMO unit. So just about finishing first year of doing a lot of subgroup activities and progressing the work. So where are we today? Obviously, we have hardware. Jeff is over here, so the access point hardware is available, from EdgeCore. In terms of NOS, similar to the hyperscale NOS, there's Mojo here. They have a commercial NOS on at least the Qualcomm set of the access points. And then there is a bunch of us as subgroup enthusiasts working on the open source NOS. So it's progressing. There are a few of us working on it. It's an OpenWRT-based NOS for the Wi-Fi APs. The link is there it's on OCP GitHub site. So we did a demonstration in the technology showcase earlier the year. And then there's some ONI updates, which we talked about, which are specific to campus branch. Doesn't really apply to hyperscale, which is essentially, since it's automated deployment and provisioning in remote sites, so you cannot be physically there. So there's some security aspects to that. So far so good. What's the problem? So as we finish like the first year, and this is some of the things I've been talking to a lot of outsiders. It's very easy to just keep pontificating in a small group. But what happens? Do you take this to outside the crowd? And we talk to people who are either not aware of the campus branch Wi-Fi folks, some of those operators in Europe, in North America, who had nothing to do with hyperscale. So what was their feedback? Well, first thing was obviously there is a lack of industry education on that side. And then there is early adopter skepticism. They didn't believe, for example, similar to hardware-software disaggregation in data centers, on the campus branch Wi-Fi, the same actors who provide integrated systems, they're entrenched, and same sort of organic participation has not happened, at least from inside the OCP operators. So obviously, lack of ecosystem. They were skeptical about the ecosystem will develop fast enough. The validation of beliefs, like the same beliefs that worked in the hyperscale hardware-software disaggregation, would that work at the edge at campus and branch sites and venues? Many of them pointed at lack of a flagship deployment. What do you have to show for it? So, and again, these are NSPs, what we call network service providers, which are used to the usual integrated products from the large vendors. And then do you have any hard data on benefits like tangibles? Again, CapEx, OpEx. On the hyperscale side, again, all these tangible and intangible benefits of an open ecosystem like service velocity, resilience, SOC independence have been proven, again, by just making it work in hyperscale data centers. But nothing of that sort has been done yet on the campus branch Wi-Fi side. So obviously, it's the first year, right? The hyperscale, again, went through 4, 5, 6 years before we got where we are. And this is in a very early stage of similar technology shift on the edge. So what can we do to accelerate this? So one of the things we were thinking about, at least contemplating a little bit, is maybe we sample, we solicit, those that a sample CVW campus trial by a mainstream operator like a service provider, or all the hyperscale providers participating here. They have large campuses. So maybe we facilitate, we kickstart the process by actually, someone who's a provider member here actually does something, deploys a trial, like a 50+ node in a campus venue environment, which is multi-month in duration. Then we can gather all the data from it. Or one of the proposal is maybe we use CVW gear for the next OCP summit. As we know, in OCP Summit, we have a huge participation, right? So last year we had like thousands of people come in. So maybe that's one place you can deploy it, and get some hard data. So what would be the successful outcome of something like that? So this is something we have not actually done in OCP. At least I have, for the 3 or 4 years I've been involved, I have not seen. But an outcome would be like a CBW or OCP published like a white paper or some sort of a collateral that captures all the same tangible benefits, the CapEx and an OpEx for campus branch Wi-Fi, all the intangibles, wireless, again, system on a chip, independence, service velocity, resilience of your network, and something like we can do something like this in target completion, publish something like that in 2018. Again, it's going to go a long way, just because obviously a lot of these branch providers or WISPs, even wireless ISPs, they show a lot of interest, but again, they have nothing to point to, and unfortunately, they don't. They're not directly participating in OCP. So that was pretty much it. Again, we don't have to solve this here. I just wanted to put it out there. We can discuss in the mailing list, and I'll be hounding some of the operators here, one-on-one to sign up for a trial like this, or maybe with the OCP leadership to do something like this for the next OCP Summit. But again, there was just a proposal out there. I'll take some questions on this if somebody has a question. If not, then I'll move to the specific, security-specific part of CBW.
So we'll throw it open for questions. It's the classic chicken and egg problem that you have here. So anybody have a discussion or comments or questions?
I'm an enterprise guy from the University of California at Santa Cruz. It strikes me that one of the things about wireless in particular is that it needs to be type approved by the FCC. And what I'm wondering is how much work is left on the table after there's an open design to get that certification.
So you're right. So it comes up, and if you see all the FCC, it was like debated to death, and one of the, obviously not a participant here, but there's a huge company called TP-Link, right? So they analyze, they talk to FCC, and it comes to find out it's actually a matter of the software providers function, because if you know the TP-Link's their whole go-to-market business, they do $1 billion in revenue with TP-Link Wi-Fi access points, and 90% of them get flashed by consumers with OpenWRT. So what they finally mandated is it's actually a software providers in the end of the day who's providing the NOS to make sure that the radiated power is under the guidelines of the FCC. So it's, in the end of the day, it's part of the NOS provider and the person who's managing that access point. So there is really not much, like, there are no gray areas which could be risky. So as long as the NOS makes sure it's under 15 dBm, you're good.
Well, there's all the DFS.
Yep. So it's part of the NOS provider as well as the entity that is operating it.
So with an open source NOS, how is that done when there's really nobody responsible per se for the testing?
So in this case, like, who's operating? So who's putting up, like, let's say if we put this in a campus, if whoever installs that hardware, and if he chooses to put open source NOS in it, in that case, it's the entity who's managing the access point, his responsibility. If they use a commercial NOS like Mojo, then obviously Mojo will ensure that their NOS does not allow the gain to be above 15 dBm.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so Murthy, you want to come up?
Hello everyone, my name is Murthy. I am from Mojo Networks. A brief background on Mojo Networks. So we are a cloud-based enterprise Wi-Fi company. So one of the main motto of our company is to have the hardware software disaggregation in the Wi-Fi space, and in fact we are the first commercial company to do this in practice, and we sell all of our access points at cost without any margin on the hardware. So we have a software license, that's how we make our money. So this concept gels well with the OCP, so we are heavily invested in the OCP. We are interested in what's going on here, and we want to contribute to OCP on the Wi-Fi front. So today I'm going to talk about two slightly orthogonal topics. The first one is we want to enable ONI support for all the Qualcomm-based ARM access point platforms, so we are working on that. So I'll quickly browse through some ideas there. And the second topic is the secure ONI for Wi-Fi APs. Want to present some thoughts here, just put some ideas for feedback to the community, and so not all details have been worked out, but we do want to put out some ideas for feedback. So jumping on to, so if you look at the Qualcomm ARM-based access points, so at a high level, typically there are series of bootloaders that are present that initialize the device, and then the U-boot is handed the control, and so the U-boot does its own boot related stuff, and then it passes the control to the kernel. So in this case, it will be the ONI kernel to begin with. That's how the boxes, the open source, open hardware based APs get shipped. So it will have an ONI kernel, and the ONI kernel along with the ONI installer stuff and so on, it will basically have the provision to identify the vendor NOS, download it and install it and so on. So our idea is to be able to enable this specific aspect for all the Qualcomm platforms for everyone. So we are working on two different approaches as we speak. So at a high level, what does it take to get an ONI build for a platform, for a Qualcomm platform? So there are two main components to this. The first one is the ONI repository itself with its build system and the installer scripts and the packaging related aspects that are there in the ONI GitHub. And so that needs to be combined with the QCA, QSDK, either open source or licensed version of it, which provides the platform specific support, the board support packages and the drivers and so on. So combining these two, we get the ONI build for a given Qualcomm platform. So our goal is, of course, to make this easy for everyone so that it can be easily adopted, and any Qualcomm based platform can be an open hardware with easy software support. So we are working on two approaches. The first approach is to actually contribute the Qualcomm components, patches, and all the board support package into the ONI GitHub. So we have tried this route with one of the edge core APs where we ported all of the proprietary stuff onto this, and so we have a build image running on the edge core EAP 1024. So this is close to completion. So this is one approach where you are contributing the platform specific software into the ONI GitHub. But then there are some challenges with this approach that we have seen during our practical implementation, which is that there are a lot of software stuff which is very proprietary licensed stuff which cannot be freely contributed to the open source. It requires permission from Qualcomm. Also, I think since there are large variety of Qualcomm based SoCs and chipsets with variation in software, so getting this done for all of them will require probably repetition of certain tasks and so on. So though we did the POC, but we realized some of these challenges in this approach. And so primarily I think some of the areas where there are some challenges is the initial bootloader partitions which have this proprietary code which is distributed in binary form. So we, and then the changes required to U-boot and the some of the board support packages. So all these patches need to be contributed from Qualcomm to the ONI GitHub. And so that is one of the challenges here. So therefore, we are also looking at a second option, which is basically to enable some sort of an ONI flag in the Qualcomm QSDK itself, and this has to be done by Qualcomm, of course. And so what this means is that there is a compile time flag when you are compiling a QSDK repository, and that flag, when you turn it on, it has certain changes for U-boot environment variables built into it. But then the rest of the ONI installer packages, etc., will be pulled in as an OpenWRT module into the Qualcomm SDK build system. The entire thing gets built up, and finally an ONI image is generated for the Qualcomm AP. So the second approach that we are pursuing, so in this approach, the main advantage is that there are no licensing issues. Anyone who has access to QSDK, either open source or proprietary version, will be able to build an ONI image out of it. So it lowers the adoption barrier, and also, of course, it enables the QSDK, the variations in QSDK to go on in parallel with the ONI without tight coupling. And so we proposed both these approaches to Qualcomm in a meeting recently, and we are working with them to take this forward. So that's a brief update on this front. Any questions at this point? Okay, so the next topic which I'll quickly go through is the secure ONI for Wi-Fi APIs. So how to enable security. So I believe some work is going on the switch space. I'm not fully plugged into it, but this is specific to the Wi-Fi access points, which have a slightly different set of requirements and challenges. So first of all, the need for security for APs, primarily because access points are like numerous in number. You deploy the tens or hundreds or even thousands of them. There is possibility of physical access. It's not like they're in a secure data center or something. And also automated installation and upgrades is a must for Wi-Fi to be able to operate at large scale, but then it introduces its own set of security risks. So keeping all of these in mind, I think secure boot and secure installation and upgrade is a must for ONI. So secure installation meaning verify either the ONI or the NOS image before installing it. On secure boot meaning at every boot verify the image on the flash that it is not tampered with and it is authentic. So these are the two aspects that I'm covering here. So one high-level proposal for secure installation of NOS to begin with, which is basically use a PKI-based system to validate the images with a database of certificates, pre-installed certificates on the device. So the access point can be shipped with a pre-installed database of certificates using which all the images can be verified. So the NOS vendor signs the NOS image installer bundle with the private key corresponding to the certificate that's already packaged into the device, and then when the ONI downloads the NOS image, it validates the digital signature using the certificate on the device. ONI also has to verify the NOS image provider's identities, because multiple NOS images can be there, but the adapter is trying to install one specific NOS vendor's image. So that validation also needs to happen. So that can be through the common name in the certificate itself, whether the intended NOS vendor's image is being installed or not. So this is a high-level proposal for the validation of NOS and ONI images during the installation and upgrade. The NOS installer verification steps at a high level would be as follows. The user specifies which NOS vendor he wants to install on these access points. So first of all, whether a validation needs to happen or not, there is the first thing that can be specified, and the second is which NOS vendor. So both of these can be specified either through, basically we can think of multiple mechanisms, but one easy way would be to use the DHCP parameters like option, some DHCP option to pass this to the device. And so ONI would construct the URL for NOS installer, and then it would basically download the signature file for the image, and ONI script uses the certificates on the device to validate the signature of the NOS installer. It extracts the certificate and then it checks the common name in the certificate against the value specified. So that way it can ensure that both the NOS image is authentic as well as it is coming from the vendor that is intended to as the provider of the NOS image. And then finally after this validation, ONI would execute the NOS installer script. So that is the part that ONI has to play, and then from this point onwards, the NOS installer script's responsibility to validate any further images that it would download. So it can basically do the same checks again using the pre-installed certificate database, whether the images are authentic based on the digital signature, as well as the NOS vendor name in the CN of the certificate. So this way, ONI ensures trustworthiness of the NOS installer, and the NOS installer in turn ensures the trustworthiness of all the files that are needed from that point onwards. And one assumption in this is that DHCP is secure, or whichever way you are specifying the NOS vendor's name, that method is secure. So that's an assumption we are making here. So this is the installation related security aspect. As far as secure boot is concerned, it can also, so secure boot is to make sure that whatever image is already there on the flash, which has been probably upgraded or installed earlier, so every time the device is booting, it's actually using the secure image, using the authentic image. So basically using the same pre-installed database of certificates, U-boot can validate either the ONI kernel or the NOS kernel, whichever it is booting into. And so if the validation fails, it has to, of course, it will halt the booting, otherwise it will go forward and load the image. So that is a secure boot. Now regarding the establishment of chain of trust, how is the trust established? So there are two proposals for this. The first option is a software-based validation starting from a lockdown U-boot, so it doesn't have any hardware basis, but we make some assumptions that certain things cannot be done. So it starts from the U-boot. So there are, on one of the flash partitions, a set of certificates can be pre-installed at the manufacturing time. And so the idea is that this partition or location on the flash that has the certificates, there shouldn't be any easy way to modify them using command line at either the bootloader or the Linux kernel. So it requires lockdown of U-boot and Linux root prompt to disable tampering of these certificates or flashing of arbitrary images. So secure boot basically means that U-boot would verify the ONI or the NOS image before booting using these certificates on the flash, or secure install meaning ONI would verify the NOS installer again using the same set of certificates. Regarding the certificate generation itself, of course, there are various ways of doing this, and this is just one way of doing it, which is that the ODM vendor generates the root CA, the main manufacturer of the hardware device, they would generate the root CA and then use that to sign the U-boot and ONI images for that specific hardware device. The NOS vendor gets a CA which is in turn derived from the root CA of the ODM, and then that is used for signing the NOS images. So I think the initial ODM vendor's root CA would go on the flash, and that would be utilized to verify both the U-boot and ONI images typically coming from the ODM vendor or the NOS coming from the NOS vendor. So the advantages to this approach, no hardware support required, so it's a pure software play. It can be ported onto various different architectures and the varied access point device platform types that are out there. And of course, one of the disadvantages is not fully tamper-proof. If one can always change the images or the certificates on the flash using mechanisms like JTAG, etc. So that is the basically a drawback of this approach. But I think this increases the bar to a great extent, and probably in a practical scenario, it makes it hard to tamper with an access points image either during installation or during the normal operation. So this is one approach. The other approach, which is basically is based on hardware chain of trust. So it basically the whole thing then relies on the security mechanisms provided by the hardware. So one example would be the trust zone, ARM trust zone implementation of Qualcomm wave to access point model. So that can be utilized to provide the chain of trust right from the hardware itself, making it fully tamper-proof. The root CA, the way it would work is there is a ROM which is programmed during the manufacturing which cannot be changed after that, and the ROM would contain the root CA or the hash of the root CA, and therefore that forms the basis for the entire chain of trust. And then the ARM TZ itself would run in a secure environment which cannot be tampered. It has a separate memory and processor and so on the board, and provides the cryptographic services to the rest of the system. And U-boot and kernel uses the underlying security mechanism. There is an API that's, for example, in the case of Qualcomm, there is an API called Secure Channel Manager, which provides the TZ services to the upper layers, so that can be utilized to do certificate validations, etc. So secure boot would work like this. So the PBL, which is the primary bootloader, would invoke from the ROM. It's running in a secure environment. It invokes the secondary bootloaders. There are like 3-4 bootloaders in the Qualcomm world, which in turn, so every bootloader is validated before it goes to the next level using the hardware chain of trust. Then it is passed along. U-boot is invoked, and then finally it invokes the Linux ONI or NOS. And so each of these images are themselves signed using the certificates that are all there in the hardware, and therefore each of these will be validated during the boot process. Regarding the secure install, again, this same verification of NOS by the ONI can be done, but this time using the hardware security infrastructure that's already there on the device, and the image can be validated before installation. And certificate generation, again, here the same approach can be followed, that the ODM vendor would burn the root CA into the ROM during the manufacturing time, and then the rest of the certificates can be stored in flash, but then they would be validated using the main root CA in the ROM, which cannot be altered, and using the secure the ARM trust zone infrastructure. And yeah, NOS vendor can get a CA derived from the root CA of the ODM, and for signing the NOS images. There are other ways of doing this. For example, OCP itself or the CBW group can have a root CA, which will in turn provide the CAs for ODMs, which will in turn provide the CAs for the NOS vendors and so on. So the PKI hierarchy can have, there are multiple ways of doing it. It needs to be decided, but these are some of the options. And the advantage is this is fully tamper-proof because it's based on hardware, and of course the disadvantage is it requires hardware support. So Qualcomm may have its own way of implementing the trust zone. Broadcom may have a slightly different way. There are MIPS access point platforms out there which may have a different way altogether. So all of this needs to be handled in software. So that is the complexity that this approach adds. So yeah, so these are some of the ideas which we are right now working on, and we'll work with the rest of the community to take this forward and maybe refine this further. So yeah, that's it. So any questions?
Sure. It seems to me that in order to have a secure booting process like you're describing, that you need physical security on the access point, and I haven't seen in the specifications for the open access points where there's a compelling way to lock the AP in place in a way that protects the RJ45 connector going back to the wired network. And it seems that without dealing with physical security, that even doing the best possible job that you've described with certificates leaves you open to a very simple kind of attack.
So there are ways to circumvent that in this hardware-based approach, where even if you get physical access to a device, still you will not be able to tamper it. There are ways to disable the JTAG ports, and no way to install any arbitrary image that would really boot.
I'm going to bring my own access point.
Well, yeah, I mean, in that case, of course, that's true.
Yeah. No, he's going to replace the access point, and you've just broken security. That's so.
I think. Actually, I don't know if, I mean, probably that, I don't know if any hardware vendor would like to address that question, but it's outside of the scope of my domain. Yeah.
So I had kind of a couple of follow-up questions, and I guess one answer to the previous point would be to secure both ends of the link, right? If your link can't authenticate, then that's what he's getting to. The RJ45 has to be secured somehow. So this model in general, I really like. There are two issues that I have that I think are going to be kind of impractical if you try to deploy it this way. The first is, you said that the DHCP server needs to be secure. It's actually much worse than that. Anything that's talking DHCP cannot be spoofing, and any kind of standard security will not help you. SourceGuard will not help you. You don't have any mechanism to block this. And anybody who's got a server who can start a DHCP session is now a potential vector of attack. And the second that is this, your sort of chain of trust is locked on the ROM. And not only do you have a disparate hardware infrastructure, ROM upgrades into an AP world is maybe difficult is the understatement of the year, right? And the moment, if anybody ever compromises that ROM, your entire stack is now lying exposed, right? So there has to be, I think, unless that's the OCP proposal, to go build a hardware specification and a vendor specification that says upgrading the ROM has to become an in-field and easy to implement requirement. This whole mechanism would get unhinged very, very quickly, I would say. I like the stack, like the stacking looks good, but.
Yeah, so I think you're right on the ROM part. At least the method that's supported by Qualcomm today, the ROM, or in fact it's called the QF PROM, that is write only once. So it is, you cannot do anything about it once it's written during manufacturing. So there is no upgrade later. So you have to make sure your certificates don't change later, nothing changes. So that's what's supported today.
Actually, this question addressed to Rajat. I have 3 questions in here. And the first question is, any hard data that the industry embrace this openness in CDW? Second question, is there any hard data that a company who contribute their AP can be benefit by selling more? And then the last question is, how can the company that contributes can be benefit from the contribution, particularly our managers care for the ROI, return on investment?
So on the hard data, I think that's the proposal, right? So in general, the idea is, especially for the ODM, we did, there's some top-down research, for example, like the whole wireless campus branch is a $23 billion industry, right? So that should be a good enough reason to do this, right? That's ready to be disrupted, right? That's the market research out there. And then actually not even market research, that's a known, the total addressable market for something like this that's owned by 4 or 5 traditional vendors, right? So that's one. So for that, I think, and the same value which the hyperscale, like the cost efficiencies, the cost structure that was realized in the data center, can actually be realized at a much grander scale with CBW, right? So I think that part is known. I think the hard data, which I found out, and maybe some others too, dealing with the WISPs, and the primary operators of this were like for venues and for wireless ISPs, who are tired of paying very high prices, and obviously want the intangibles as well. One of the things that they want some hard data is like, can this really work? because obviously there is a benefit to an integrated product because you have one neck to choke, right? So whose neck you're going to choke in this scenario, right? So again, it was proven by adoption in hyperscale, but we need some data. So I think that's just to jumpstart this process. Part of the reason is because CVW is not being deployed by a lot of these member operator companies right away. They're doing, either they don't have the need right away or they're mostly focused on hyperscale. And what was the third question? I sorry, forgot about that.
Company that they contribute to these AV or something, what is their benefit? Because our manager always asks, what is the return of investment?
Well, again, it's a $23 billion market out there, which is cornered by 4 companies. That's the benefit.
Just as a follow-up point, it is pretty interesting there because actually I spent a bunch of time, I was talking to some folks probably the last year and a half dealing more with the wireless ISP side than I did with the data center side. And so it's I see a parallel there in that, probably 5-10 years ago, you saw certain companies going to ODMs and say, build me that custom switch, and they'll roll out that custom switch, but there wasn't sort of this OCP open community around that, right? A lot of the wireless, the WISPs that are doing this now, if you look at the large scale ones that are rolling out service to millions of new customers around the world, they're not taking sort of vertically integrated APs, and they're not doing that. They're saying, I need to roll out 10, 20, 100,000 APs across my country. I'm going to go to an ODM and build a tight relationship and build that, but it's typically not an open platform, right? So we may be where the wireless group may be where data center networking was a few years ago, where yes, people were doing this, but it wasn't in an open way. Hopefully through this and other efforts that the more and more wireless ISPs will be bringing on, upgrading their services out, their access services, and can do it more in an open way. So that's just an analogy that I've seen, bridging the two spaces.
Yeah, if you just see the gross margins, and if you just, it's very easy to check, so go to any channel or any Amazon site, known products, 4x4, AC, even Wave 2, MIMO unit, the ASP is like $1,000. So that's what's out there. That needs to be disrupted.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, Hector.
All right. Hey, first off, I want to say thanks for presenting and bringing up these topics. From the ONI build system aspect about dealing with the QDK or what was it, the QSDK? Yeah. Right. It's something that we always face is the proprietary firmwares that are involved for some of these switching ASICs and Wi-Fi ASICs. I mean, those are very important topics. And also the second topic about the chain of trust. What do we trust? Where does trust begin? How do we propagate that trust? These are also very critical in our times, of course. I don't want to get too deep into it because I think we're running up against lunch soon, but we will definitely talk more about these during the breakout sessions. This is excellent jumping off points for some of the breakout sessions that we'll be having after lunch. But so that's all I really wanted to say.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the morning program that we had. We're going to break for lunch now. There's pizza in the kitchen and salads that you can eat. We're going to stop for 45 minutes, but I did want to put this up before we break. So these are the breakout sessions that people had said, oh yeah, these are things we want to talk about and work on at the workshop. So if you have a topic that's not up here that you want to work on, let Omar or myself know, and we can add it to the afternoon sessions. I think we actually have covered the first one, unless we want to go into more depth later on that one. So we have five breakout sessions. And when we come back from lunch at 12:45, we'll have like a quick overview. Each of the leaders of the breakouts will give a quick overview of what it's going to be about, and then we'll figure out where each one's going to be after lunch. Okay, we'll see you out at 12:45.